Welcome back to part two of Ukraine War Update Extra for today, the 18th of November. These are the juicy nuggets to help you give a greater understanding of what's going on in the Ukraine war. Let's get to it. Where shall I start? Well, let's start with our friend Victor Olevich. Who is he? He's one of the only people on this Russian TV panel show that we see so often that Julia Davis does such a good job of translating. And he is the one who speaks truth to misinformation and disinformation, and he is the one that is the one who says stuff that we're all kind of thinking. He has an alternative narrative than the propaganda towing the party line that the other panelists do, and you wonder how long he's going to be able to continue to appear on that program and not be sort of shut down or refused um, his presence there. Now, in this one, he's still there, but he's now experiencing problems with his microphone. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but one of the hosts is particularly glowing. Let's have a look at this. I will read it out because I know some people listen to this rather than watch it. So while you're doing other things, you'll listen to me talk about this stuff. So I'll read out the subtitles, but it's worth sort of obviously worth watching what goes on here. There are multiple people involved, so I'll just be speaking with my same voice for all of them. So US and NATO allies are not planning and at this moment don't want to start. So this is him speaking with something of an echo because his microphone isn't switched on. So this is the policy analyst Victor Olevich, the guy who says stuff that that is against like the Russian narrative. So I'll start that again. That echoey sound. US and NATO allies are not planning and at this moment don't want to start a direct military conflict between NATO and Russia. Victor Josephovich, please stop, because your microphone stopped working. Our colleagues will swap it for you. Alexei Genovich, another panelist. You take over. You said the American allies. So they give him another mic. So he's now got a handheld microphone, and this still isn't working. So he was saying they were saying to another panelist, okay, you take over because we can't hear from Olevich, and then they give him another microphone, and it still doesn't work. Surprise, surprise. Americans and their NATO partners are not planning and then it starts working, and then they say it's not working out. It's not working. Sorry. So just as it starts kicking in, and with a huge cheesy grin, what one of the hosts is seeing as the other host takes the microphone off him. And then another panelist starts to speak. So it's just really interesting. His first microphone didn't work. His second one didn't work. Then it starts kicking in, and then they take it off him. Yeah, not sure about freedom of press going on in Russia. This is the report of Canadian Armed Forces deploying sappers to Poland to train soldiers of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on a range of basic and advanced engineering skills, engineering reconnaissance and the use of explosives for demolition work and demining via the 1st Canadian Mechanised Brigade Group. So this is something that started with the UK taking over a couple of cohorts, I think, of 10,000 Ukrainian troops to train them. And I think those are the most recent cohort is just finishing their training now and will be soon back on the front lines or roundabouts now. I think I might have to check that out. But this is something the UK have taken lead on, which I think is really good. And now we now hear that I think the Czech armed forces are training Ukrainians, I think possibly in the Czech Republic. And here we have the Canadian Armed Forces doing the same in Poland. So rest assured there'll be heaps of people involved in all of these. And in fact, with the UK one, I say the UK taking the lead, you had Swedish, Aussies, Kiwis training the Ukrainians in the UK. UK provided sort of the place and training themselves, but invited others to help with the training. So that's excellent. And this kind of NATO training will provide the Ukrainian soldiers with such a much better level of training than obviously the mobilized Russian troops, but also the mainstay of the Russian army as well, I would imagine. And then here is a video shot in the village of Mikhailivka in Zaporizhia, around 50 k's north of Melitopol. Locals say a variety of vehicles stay there, some under the maternity ward. So this is the military hiding their vehicles in hospitals. Just a quick 3-second, 5-second video here. As you see, just there, underneath hospital wing or corridor or whatever, is the Russian military vehicle. And we saw this in the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. I think the Enerdoha plant. I don't know whether this is a war crime. I'm not 100% sure, but I can understand why they do this. Like, this is me trying to be as objective as possible. Like, if I was the Russian forces, you think, right, Ukraine are never going to bomb a hospital. They're never going to bomb a nuclear power plant. So if we can stack as much stuff there, we can guarantee that won't get hit. You know, this is war. This isn't like you're torturing prisoners. This isn't like shooting people in the back of the head when they're walking away, civilians. But this is so, you know, I think it's a category difference between those kind of things. But I would imagine thinking this myself. Now, I'd have to look at what the definitions of war crimes and whether this is one and blah, blah, blah. But uh, I can understand why they would do this, which is to safeguard a whole bunch of vehicles and equipment from being blown up, because Ukraine rightly won't be targeting hospitals and nuclear power stations. Now, you may well call me out and attack me for that, but in wartime, and I'm sure there's evidence of Ukraine doing this as well. But the difference is, Russia don't give a damn if they're going to hit a a hospital or a school or whatever. So there's a moral difference in the attack there, but in the use of these kind of safe spaces for housing military equipment, I can understand why they would do that. But please attack me if I'm wrong in any way. But it's not that I'm wrong. I mean, it's clearly why they do this. It's just whether it's a right thing to do. But of course, you know, the whole war isn't a right thing to do, so they shouldn't be there at all. But if they are going to do this, then I can understand why they would hide their vehicles in such a way. Anyway, over to what I'd pre-recorded from the back end of the last video. This is awesome. An Australian mining billionaire, Andrew Forrest. So props to Australia. Well, not really you as a country, because you take no responsibility for what Andrew Forrest does. But imagine that you feel good about yourselves as a country because this guy does it. And his wife launch an investment fund with $500 million of their own money, which in time may be worth $25 to $100 billion, with the sole aim of rebuilding wrecked Ukraine. So this is really cool for this guy to be doing that, and he launches this investment fund because I keep thinking about this, and I'm not going to talk about it today, but there is a really powerful Ukraine the Latest Daily Telegraph podcast segment. And I wasn't going to listen to it because I thought I was going to be emotionally a bit difficult, and I know what it's going to say, and it's just a bit too depressing. But it was on like the future of the children in Ukraine and how damaged young children are becoming with no schooling, and they'll have behavioral problems, psychological problems, attachment issues, all this stuff. And the orphanages are just terrible. You know, you've got people working the orphanages falling apart, so they're not then showing proper primary caregiver what the behavior to the children falling apart and blah blah blah. Anyway, that whole segment was just massively eye-opening and very, very well worth seeing. I think it was in maybe yesterday's or 2 days ago, Ukraine the Latest. The point being that rebuilding Ukraine isn't going to be just about rebuilding buildings and infrastructure. It's going to be about the education system. It's going to be about a whole cohort or set of cohorts of broken humans, like children. You know, I know this. I've taught for over a decade, and I'm not a teacher anymore because I had to give up due to multiple sclerosis. But you know, I have come into contact with a whole range of children in differing sort of socio-economic demographics, and these things are challenging in a comfortable developed nation. Well, you look at a war-torn, a post-war Ukraine, and picking up the pieces is going to take so much time, effort, and money, and you will have an awful lot of humans who are going to be de-skilled, lacking in education and lacking in psychological, stability. That trying to fix those problems is going to be massive. So moving on to okay, I'm going to say some things about the GOP. So what is the GOP? For the people who are not American, GOP stands for Grand Old Party. It's the American Republicans. So they sit to the right of the UK Conservatives, probably aligned a little bit to them. But yeah, basically you're a Conservative Party. Don't worry, I'm not going to have a rant about politics here, but these are things that are coming out which I think you need to know about. I won't give too much comment because I don't want to annoy my listeners too much. You make up your own minds about what I'm just about to show you. So we've got a GOP operative found guilty of funneling Russian money to Donald Trump. So Jesse Benton was pardoned by Trump for a different campaign finance crime months before he was indicted again on 6 counts related to facilitating an illegal foreign campaign donation. So this is really interesting about the Russian money that has been flowing around in America and why it's there and what the intentions have been behind that money. So that's interesting. Jesse Benton, have a look out for that. This genuinely annoys me. The next thing, like even more than that, because it does, but I try not to comment too much. So if you don't know, if you're not American and you don't know who Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is, she's on the real fringe wing, the anti-Ukraine wing of the GOP, of the Republican Party. She's a MAGA, big-time MAGA representative in the House. And she has, there's 2 things she said in the last couple of days which should worry anyone who's pro-Ukraine. So she came out with this video, put a video of these are Ukrainian injured soldiers who are in Congress to try and put pressure on America to keep the support up for America. It's the kind of thing that you do. It's lobbying effectively. But it's really important for Ukraine to continue doing this, because if they're not in the limelight, people forget about them, and you need that emotional connection as well, because that's very powerful, very persuasive. But Marjorie Taylor Greene says it's heartbreaking to see these disabled Ukrainian soldiers here in the halls of Congress being used as pawns to pressure our Congress to give America's hard-earned tax dollars to Zelensky. I'm calling for an audit of funds to Ukraine and to fund and secure our border. So she's saying we need to build a wall on the southern border of America, between Mexico and America. That's what we need to be spending our money, and not sending it to Ukraine. And of course, Michael Weiss here is saying she's not heartbroken even in the slightest, and whatever these men left of themselves on the battlefield is worth more than her political career will ever amount to. But it got worse, because
proxy war with Russia. We had 5 million people cross our border illegally since Joe Biden took office. And let's compare that to how many Russians have invaded Ukraine. 82,000 Russians have invaded Ukraine. I think the American people and the taxpayers of this country deserve to know why the Biden administration and this Congress is so interested in funding the protection of Ukraine's border and not the protection of our border. That's a very good question.
So actually, she's incorrect with the amount of. I mean, there's probably, over the length of the war, probably 500,000 now Russians. But anyway, by the by, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a favourite of Ukrainians at the moment, and I know a lot of you will be Republican, and there are, as in the UK Conservative Party, there are splits, right, where you might be, okay, I'm pro-Ukraine, but I don't like this. I used to like Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I don't agree with her here, or I like her in this area. Like, we can be nuanced, right? You can say, I like what she says on these things, or I like what the GOP says on these things, but I disagree with this element here, and that's fine. That's nuanced. And I completely accept that kind of thinking. So just anyway, something to watch out for. I don't want to be bashing the GOP though, because I know half of you will hang me for it. here, interesting. I played you a video of a decoy getting hit by a Lancet drone. Just to remind you, if you didn't see in their previous video, this is it. Lots of people saying this is obviously a decoy of a radar system, and the Lancet drone has hit it. Isn't that great that decoys are sucking up the Lancets and being being successful in their objectives, which is to waste expensive armaments. Not that a Lancet is going to be crazy expensive, but this is doing its job as a decoy. Bosh, there you go. Okay. But this guy says, after seeing the video posted on Ukraine weapons tracker, which is who said it was a decoy, blah blah blah, of a Russian Lancet hitting a 5N63S radar, I figured this deserves some more attention. Hard to answer the decoy question on the spot, but this is definitely a Russian 5N63S radar struck by a Russian Lancet loitering drone. So he goes on to say, the location of the system is geoconfirmed to here, which is Kherson Oblast. The video came online on the 16th of November. If we assume that the attack was recent and consider the nice weather during the attack, 14th to 15th seems the most probable days. Below is a map with the location and the front line from just before the Russian occupiers left the Kherson area. So there it is, in a pretty sensible place. Around that time, the whole Kherson area was already abandoned by Russia, allowing for Ukraine to reclaim their lands. So when was this radar system present? The picture below is from the 3rd of November, 6 days before Russia left. Clearly, this was a Russian radar. Note both TELs marked in red. So these would be sort of all part of the same system. But even if we go way back in time to as early as 2nd of September, this system is already present. Let's be honest, the S-300 radar with 2 launchers that doesn't move for 2 months, very, very odd indeed. All 3 systems could have been struck by Ukraine, but there are no signs of that. What else is there to learn from this attack video? Well, it misses both generators and the tall antenna behind the driver compartment. That could well have been recovered after it was struck, but it is impossible to prove. It does a sort of little bit of talking about what should be there and wasn't there. What else? On the radar piece, there is no door visible on the side. However, as depicted, so that's where it should be on the side, as depicted in the red square, a door was present where it is not expected. So it looks like it's on a sort of back of the unit. So to sum it all up, the 5N63S radar and both TELs are Russian. All systems were already present in September 22nd, well before Ukraine took the area back. No visible damage on the satellite imagery, and the radar lacks some parts that looked somewhat different that could indicate it is a decoy. But great job, Russia. Decoy or not, you still hit one of your own. If I knew better, I would say one of the raccoons you stole was a flying raccoon with a gun. So this is interesting and a great bit of open source intelligence research. I mean, this is fantastic. This leads you to think, well, it could well be a radar, but it's one that's been left behind and was strangely not moved. It's in the same place for a month, at least a month, which is odd. You move these things about so they're not detected and hit. And the Russians have hit it. And the Russians would know that it's their own because they should know it's their own because it's been there for months. So could this be then trying to hit one of their own genuine radar systems so the Ukrainians cannot use it, so it takes it out? Or are they fooled by a decoy? But is it really a decoy? Because it looks like it's actually a radar. So the end result is either the Russians have destroyed a decoy or they've destroyed their own vehicle. And if they destroyed their own vehicle, they've either done it accidentally think it's a Ukrainian vehicle, or they've done it knowingly think that it's a Russian vehicle, so the Ukrainians can't use it. Just lots of permutations there. I think it's interesting when people challenge all sorts of quotes. Challenge all sorts of claims. Anyway, the very last thing is something on the Kremlin and well worth considering. So this is from Russian news source Medusa, which is now in exile in Riga in Latvia. So one of Vladimir Putin's inner circle tells Medusa that they understand Russia's, quote, already lost the war. Worth translating the original here, Medusa has consistently been one of the most reliable Russian news sources. Okay, so what does the article actually say? Here's a Google Translate of it. The AP's political bloc is slightly more optimistic. One of Medusa's interlocutors explained that the Kremlin still hopes that the West will collapse the consensus in support of Ukraine due to the need for cheap energy. Another hope for the Kremlin, according to sources from Medusa, is a sharp change in the political situation in Ukraine itself and the resignation of Vladimir Zelensky. What the expectation of such events is based on is unknown to Medusa. In addition, the Kremlin believes that in a few months the Russian army will become more combat ready due to mobilization and will be able to turn the tide at the front. At the same time, according to Medusa's interlocutors, the presidential administration noticed that, unlike the elites, the retreat from Kherson had no effect on the mood of most Russians. Society almost does not notice this, is not interesting to him. The accession of Kherson did not have time to promote in propaganda. Thank God this blocked the mobilization. At first, they thought it was bad, but now it turns out misfortune has helped. People did not catch fire with Kherson and therefore easily accept official explanations that it was necessary to leave it. And the data of independent sociological studies rather confirms these ideas. So that's interesting. But uh, Medusa sources close to the Russian administration and the government of the Russian Federation emphasized the retreat from Kherson was a very painful event for the Russian elites. So the elites, on the other hand, so the interlocutor close to entrepreneurs from Vladimir Putin's inner circle spoke out even harsher. There is an understanding we lost the real war. People begin to think about how to live on, what place they would like to take in the future, what bet to make, what to play. On the one hand, there will be revanchist sentiments. On the other hand, there will be a request for normalization, stabilization. So this is kind of like the difference between the elites that know what's going on and the general public listening to the party line from the Kremlin. And the question, I guess, is whether people in the Kremlin making the military decisions really know what's going on and how they interpret things that are happening on the battlefield. So you've got this, really interesting dichotomy of views within the upper echelons of Russian society. So there you go. Just to continue a bit more here. Another regional official admitted that in his circle, the feeling of someone else's war began to arise. Previously, the special operation was a background, which perhaps even caused pride, especially if you were not interested in anything other than the official information. After mobilization, this is a part of life, but no one asks you about these decisions. It's up there that they are fighting, and even without success, but it influences us. Similar sentiments penetrate both the presidential administration and the government. Medusa sources acknowledge that amid constant military defeats, they were even more concerned about the total closeness of the country's top leadership. They quote, "They don't dedicate us to anything. We learn a lot from the news, both Ukrainian and Western. It looks like we are constantly making concessions and are still trying to hide it." A Medusa source close to the government explained, adding that the depressing impression was also made by the Kremlin's throwing about the grain denial. So again, it's this like even people high up in the administration or close to the administration don't really know 100% of what's going on because all the information they're getting are or sorry, the information they're getting from within Russia from these official sources. But if they go out and access Western and Ukrainian media, then they're getting a very different narrative that gives them cause to sort of doubt what they're being told from inside. He noted that among high-ranking officials, the position of representatives of the elite who do not fit the special operation completely seems more and more reasonable. As Medusa previously reported, during the war, a so-called party of silence formed among the top Russian officials. Its representatives prefer to conscientiously carry out certain instructions of the top leadership related to the war, but they do not openly make militaristic speeches. Medusa's interlocutors singled out Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin and Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin as representatives of this party. So this is the idea that you've got Russian administrative personnel who are towing the party line officially, but they aren't really singing about it. They're not giving you all the rhetoric, which is to say they're like this silent party of silence. Yep, okay, this is what's going on, but I'm not saying anything else because actually I know that it's all just a crock of shite, and what we're being fed is nonsense and is morally problematic. But do you know what? I value my life and my family's lives. So I'm going to go along with all this, but I'll do the bare minimum in order to support this. So I think that's interesting. Nevertheless, according to Medusa sources, despite all the dissatisfaction, Russian officials and businessmen do not intend to take any action against Putin. I just want this all to end as soon as possible. And that pretty much sums it all up, which is there's not enough, because the Kremlin has done such a good job of breaking up dissent. I talked to you earlier today about how human rights activists, 4 of them, have been exiled, I think. Basically, there's no narrative to provide, there's no alternative narrative to what the Kremlin is providing from within Russia. And so no one knows, unless they have access to Western media and VPNs and whatnot, what is going on really in Ukraine. And so most everyday people are going to be kind of sucking up the Kremlin narrative and just going along with it. And at the same time, people like Alexei Navalny are in prison. Most opposition leaders are exiled or in prison or disappeared, and therefore there is no cohesive opposition to Putin. So even with people like this who recognize the reality of this scenario, they're not in a position to challenge Putin, uh, because they're being picked off bit by bit, piecemeal, and there just isn't a surge of cohesive opposition to Putin. It's just impossible, especially with the internal security services having that many personnel. Apparently, there are more internal security members than army in Russia. So it's really, really difficult. Anyway, I thought that might be interesting to just delve into a little bit. Please, as ever, as I always say, please like, subscribe, share, and all that kind of stuff. I am starting up a new channel. I have started up a new channel. The details will be in the description to this. But if you go to youtube.com and just put / @ATPGeo, ATP Geopolitics, I'm going to start putting my Russia stuff on this channel. I just want the subscribers to shift over to also subscribe to this, and then eventually I'll phase out putting the videos on my normal Atypical Philosopher channel, and the geopolitical stuff will be on this channel. And if you're interested in both, subscribe to both. But it just will help out the algorithm a bit more. If people don't like sifting through my philosophy rubbish, then they don't have to. But that is my core stuff, so I want to keep that as my original channel, and this will be the home for all the Ukraine stuff and anything going forwards after the war, because hopefully it will be not long until it is ended. That's, fingers crossed, and then I'll have to talk about something else, and I hope that day comes sooner rather than later. Anyway, thank you for your support. You take care, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.